Throughout the ages, history has been altered by word of mouth and the misrepresentation of those who might not have been present when some of the world's most significant events took place. Channelers Barry and Connie Strohm bring through the spirits of those who actually witnessed or took part in these historical events and lets them tell their stories in their own words. Welcome to Channeling History. And now, here are your hosts, Barry and Connie Strohm.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Channeling History. We're the only show where we speak to the souls that made things happen. All of our guests are on the other side, and we're brought to you on the Parix Radio Network. I'm Barry Strohm, your host, and I'll be doing the channeling tonight.
I would like to thank you all for tuning into our show this evening. I'm Connie Strohm, your co-host, and I will be asking the questions of our spirit guest, George Bush, our 41st President of the United States. Please tell your friends about us so we can continue to grow our audience and get some true history out there.
Okay. We always feel that it's quite important to give a small disclaimer when we start out because we have absolutely no idea what our guests are going to say. And we know from experience that we're always going to upset somebody. So the questions or statements voiced on our show are the channeled words of the spirits and do not necessarily reflect our opinions, those of the Parix Network, or those of our sponsors. Now, all of our shows are available on my YouTube channel. It's in my name, Barry Strohm. If you'd like to download them, you can go to Podomatic.com and just search Channeling History. All of our shows can also be heard on Spotify, Audible, Pandora, iTunes, and many of the other platforms.
We welcome your questions tonight through the chat room. While we do have questions prepared for our guests, we always welcome your participation and look forward to your questions because we get some pretty darn good ones out of our chat room.
Okay, now, before we begin, you also know that Connie does a prayer protection. We do open the channel to the other side when we do this, and we want to make sure that nothing comes through that we don't want to have with us on the show. So Connie's going to say the prayer, and we're going to begin to channel with President Bush.
God, please grant us your wisdom and protection. Grant us the knowledge that we can handle and keep us safe from all things that will harm us. Keep the messages positive and pure love. Keep us safe from our egos. We ask these things in the light of the seen, the unseen, and the honesty of God.
All right, Connie, let's get her started because we got a lot of questions for our guests tonight.
Good evening, Mr. President, and thank you so much for joining us. Would you like to begin with a message?
I might as well, yes. I want to thank you for allowing me to come through. This is the first time I've actually been able to speak to humans since I've been on the other side. And I must admit, I was kind of looking forward to it. I did a lot of things in my life. When I was young, I served in the Second World War, got into politics, did a lot of things, had a chance to help a lot of people. I think that I did help many people. I know that I made some mistakes. We all do that. If we wouldn't be human if we didn't make some mistakes. But I'm generally pleased with everything that took place in my life. I certainly saw a lot of history take place, helped with a lot of it. I know you've got some pretty interesting questions made up for me tonight. So why don't we just get on with them?
Yes, because I'm looking forward to hearing your answers. What level are you on in heaven?
Connie, right now I'm on the 4th level. I know you probably expected me to be on a little higher level than that. But as I said, I did make some mistakes. I will be coming back soon. I'll be trying to do a little bit better. But I did a lot of good things. But I suspect you may find out that I did a few things that weren't exactly what I should have been doing as well.
Well, as you said, you're human. We all were. Could you tell us about your parents?
Came from a wealthy family. Grew up in New England states. My father was in finance. My uncle, my whole family, we were pretty well off. My father wound up running for the Senate and actually served in the Senate for 6 years. So he did set a political example for us. We had a lot of contacts. My mother was a good person. They sent us to the best schools. But when I was growing up, it was the pre-World War II years, and there was a lot going on. So generally, I would say that I had a very good set of parents.
It's wonderful. As you were growing up, did you think about being a politician?
Well, I think everybody in our family thought a little bit about being a politician. As I said, the clouds were forming for the Second World War. Japan attacked us. I wanted to finish up my schooling, but as soon as I did, I signed up. I went into the Air Force. I was only 18 years of age, and I was flying combat missions. I must admit, in the beginning, I was thinking more about trying to come back home after the war than I was really about getting into politics. But things went well for me. I mean, I did have problems flying missions, combat missions. I think I had 58 or 59 of them in those old torpedo bombers. But once I got back, I realized things were changing. I did not immediately want to go into politics. I went into the oil business, did pretty well at it. Started some offshore drilling companies, and we were quite successful. But no, I really can't say as I was growing up, I thought I wanted to be a politician.
Yeah. Okay, you mentioned that you flew the torpedo bombers. What was it like being a torpedo bomber pilot?
Well, in those days, we didn't have all the technologies that you obviously have today in our Air Force. Torpedo bombers were actually a very dangerous type of craft to fly. We had to make our approaches lower. We were very susceptible to anti-aircraft fire. It was a time that we knew we had to succeed. We all thought that that we were going to be forced into attacking Japan at some point. We knew that we had to do as much damage to the Japanese military as we could. It was very dangerous. Many of my friends were shot down. Many of them were killed. I was very lucky. I guess you could say, extremely lucky that I managed to come back.
Yeah. In 1944, you were shot down on a combat mission. Tell us about what happened.
We were flying a combat mission, and I was struck with AA fire. My plane was disabled. I managed to get over the water to bail out. Thank God I did, because some of my friends were also hit. They had to come down over land and were captured and killed by the Japanese. I landed in the water, and I was actually saved by a submarine. I must admit there were times during what was taking place that I had serious doubts whether I was going to make it back. So many of my good friends were killed. It was just a terrible time. World War II was incredibly violent, and I learned lessons. I hope that I learned lessons that helped me when I became a politician and advanced and even became the President of the United States. But those memories of what took place during my combat missions were always with me in life.
Yeah. Okay, evidently our listeners have been waiting for you because we've got a few questions already out of the chat room. One is, were you involved in any way with the death of John Kennedy?
No, I was not actively involved in the death of President Kennedy. I thought something was going on in the government. I wasn't really sure. We'd heard rumors that there was a lot of hatred. We knew that Jack had told Lyndon that he was not going to be on the ticket, and we had heard rumors that he was very, very upset. But no, I did not have anything to do with the assassination.
I was pretty sure that was the case. In, 1945, you married Barbara Pierce. Will you tell us about her?
When I married Barbara, it was just after the war. Everybody wanted to just simply raise families, fall in love, forget about all the terrible things that had just taken place before. I met her at a social function and fell in love with her. I thought that she was a beautiful woman, and I decided that I wanted her to be the mother of my children.
Okay. Are you with her on the other side?
We do see each other occasionally, but not that often.
Okay. What level is she on in heaven?
Barbara made some bad choices in her life, and actually she's on the second level. There were some things that she did that she should not have done. There were some beliefs that she should not have held. And when she returned, she was judged very harshly for some of the things that took place in her life. But we do see each other.
Okay. You were a highly successful oil company executive. Will you tell us about your time as the oil company executive?
Well, it was a boom time for our country. After World War II, all the boys were coming home. They were looking for employment. They wanted to raise families. They wanted to get back to a normal life. Many of them had been in the military for 3, 4, 5 years. The economy was booming. Oil and petroleum products were essentially the fuel that was driving the economy. Automobiles were now cheap and everybody could afford them, and all the boys coming home wanted to have their own automobile, and it was powered by gasoline. I realized that there were vast resources of natural gas and petroleum available in Texas. That was one reason why we moved to the state of Texas to live. We formed a couple companies. One of them was Zapata Offshore, which was a name that a lot of people have heard of. So yes, we took advantage of the times. Thankfully, my father and family had the resources that they could help fund some of the projects that we were doing. I had a lot of good ideas, I think. I hired a lot of people, and we made gas available for the automobiles at a very reasonable rate. So we truly helped the country to expand after the war. Keep in mind that during the war, most of the factories were making military equipment, tanks, trucks, other vehicles. It was a time where everything changed. The government was no longer the largest employer of people. They stepped out away from a lot of the industries. The automobile companies expanded extremely rapidly, and it was an excellent time to be in business.
By 1959, you became active in the Republican Party. Please tell us about your attempts to run for the Senate.
That was probably a mistake on my part. In those days, Texas was a Democratic state, very strong. I decided to run against the incumbent senator, did not do well at all. I tried again later. The gentleman that beat me the first time was retiring, and I thought that I would have another chance, and found out that sometimes things don't always work out the way that you would like them to work out. I was lucky to have many political connections through my family. They introduced me to some of the politicians in other states where the Republicans were more successful. I wound up getting some political appointments. I did eventually run for the House and was successful in that. But I think that if my family did not have the connections that they had, that I probably would not experience nearly the success that I had in politics.
You were the ambassador to the United Nations from 1971 to 1973. Will you tell us about that experience?
My time at the United Nations laid a really strong foundation in my understanding of foreign policy. Keep in mind, this was the time of the Cold War. Everybody thought that there would be a point at which the democracies of the world would probably experience a nuclear conflict with Russia. Russia was very obstinate. They were building a huge military. They were building nuclear weapons at a very rapid rate. It was a very, very difficult time. Keep in mind that Russia and China possessed veto powers in the United Nations. So we would bring up articles that would try to generate a slowing of the construction of nuclear weapons. Russia would step in and veto it. We realized that there was really not a whole lot the United Nations was going to be able to accomplish. All it was a sounding board. It gave us the opportunity to speak to the people and have the people hopefully hear the truth and understand what was taking place in the world. My time at the United Nations taught me a lot. It taught me that there were things that you could accomplish, but there were many, many things that you could not accomplish there. It was a wonderful learning experience for me.
What do you think about the United Nations today?
If you think it was difficult in my time, think about what it is today. Many of the belligerent states have joined together. It is probably much more difficult to accomplish anything today than it actually was in my time. You find that many of the committees have members on them that totally render the committees obsolete. Sadly, there is so much money wasted today in the United Nations. They do have some good programs. They do help with world health, situations like that. But even today, you find out that the veto power of China and Russia is so complete that very little is being accomplished in reality.
Yeah. What changes would you recommend to be made to the United Nations?
I think that the most valuable change you could make was to take away the veto power of any country. And now I'm talking about taking it away from the United States as well. If you took away veto, I think it would force them to cooperate in certain areas. It would allow people to accomplish certain things that have absolutely no chance of being accomplished today. That would be the one change that I would make.
In 1973, you became chairman of the Republican National Committee, the same time that the Watergate scandal was taking place. Did you know anything about Watergate?
Right after it happened, I started hearing rumors that something bad was taking place. There were people in our party that, and I can't describe it any way, that were utterly stupid. They thought that, I guess, intelligence or information on what the Democrats were doing could help give Nixon a great push in helping. The fools broke in and left evidence of the break-in and wound up getting caught. Once things became public, I started asking a lot of questions about Watergate. I was not part of the planning for it, and I did not participate actively in it. The president, Nixon, had told me that he was not involved, and I took him at his word. Sadly, situations changed, but no. As it was taking place, I did not know anything about it. But after it had taken place, I tried to learn as much as I could.
Yeah. Okay, so at the one point you were a big supporter of Richard Nixon. Do you think he should have been impeached?
Dick misled me. I thought that he was clean and did not know anything about it. And at the time it took place, I don't think he did. But when the tapes came out and I found out that he had altered them, I knew that that was the beginning of the end for him. Once I learned of that, I informed him that I could no longer support him. I told him that I thought that he would truly be impeached, that there were votes there in the House and the Senate, and that there was really very little that he could do but resign. I told him that it would be very bad for the country if he tried to fight it, and that with the evidence that was coming out at the time, that it would only have the same result. I advised him that it would be wise for him to resign.
Yeah. Would you consider Gerald Ford a competent president?
Gerald was actually a lot brighter than people gave him credit for. I thought he came into a bad situation. I thought that Gerald Ford was actually a pretty good president for all the situations that he was thrown into. Yes, I would say he was quite competent.
Okay. You were the chief liaison officer to the People's Republic of China from 1973 through 1974. What is your opinion about China today?
Well, we were trying to introduce China into the world, and I think we truly succeeded. China today is a huge enemy. I don't know any other way to describe it. The Communist Party in China has set goals to become the strongest country in the world. Their desire is to replace the United States and the other democracies. They're currently doing everything they can do with many countries to make those countries dependent upon the Chinese economy with products. China is building roads for countries. It is lending them money. It is setting up a worldwide network of countries that will be beholden to them for the near term and for the long term. You have to keep in mind that China makes plans far into the future. For our government, sometimes I think it's difficult for them to make plans for what's taking place a couple weeks in advance. China is looking far into the future. They will make plans that they think will come to fruition in 30 to 40 years. China is purchasing properties in the United States. They're educating their young here. They are doing everything that they can to learn our technologies. They put their children through our schools and they gain jobs in our technical industries. But they are still loyal to the country from which they came. China is stealing our technologies. It is making our country dependent upon their imports. In China, the cost of labor is very low. They have huge areas where they use slave labor. They have labor that has no cost to them. We try to compete with a fair labor rate, fair wage for everyone. We try to have our people advance in their standards of living. And we think that we can compete with China. If you look at where your drugs come from, many of the drugs that most people are dependent on come from China. Through the years, they have made us dependent upon them. That dependency, if we don't overcome it, is going to be our long-term downfall. China also is growing into a great military power. Now, they do not know how their military is going to perform until they actually get into a war. But they are building military equipment that is very, very technologically advanced. And in some areas, I think it's more advanced than some of our stuff. So yes, I think China has to be treated as a long-term enemy.
Do you think they will attack Taiwan?
It is an interesting question. I know they would like to. But they're also seeing how the world is responding to what Russia is doing in Ukraine. I think China totally underestimated how the free countries would react to Russia's war. The real difficulty was created in 2014 when Russia was allowed to take Crimea. There was very, very little world reaction. So I think both China and Russia thought, well, we'll try it again. There'll be a little bit of noise at the UN, but we'll go in and Russia will take over the entire Ukraine, and they will have all those natural resources for dominance in the future. Ever since the world reacted so strongly to taking over to the Russian invasion, I think it has given China caution. Now, what they are doing, as we watch from over here, we're seeing that they're supporting North Korea. And they're having North Korea become much more aggressive. I think how we respond to North Korea will have a big impact on what happens in Taiwan in the future.
How do you think we should be treating China today?
I think that we should become self-sufficient in our technology industries, in the production of computer chips. I think we need to have our own pharmaceuticals produced over here in this country. I think that we still can trade with them in certain areas, but we have to examine critical areas where they could have a great impact upon us in the future. I think that we need to try to expand in areas where China becomes dependent upon us and not us upon China.
Could not agree more. In 1976, you were sworn in as head of the CIA and served under Carter until Carter was inaugurated in 1977. During that time, did you learn anything about the Kennedy assassination?
Yes, I learned a lot of things about a lot of things during that time. And that year that I was the head of the CIA also played a very important role when I became president. I did learn that there was a lot more to the Kennedy assassination than what was made public. There was a much deeper conspiracy. I learned of the individuals that carried out the conspiracy, and I also learned who was behind it.
Okay. What was your opinion of Lyndon Johnson?
Lyndon was a very evil person. He had many friends that were members of the mob. He had done much to gain political power, and he played a huge role in having Kennedy assassinated. All right, let's take a little break here. We will return, and then we have a lot more questions to go.
Don't go away. Channeling History will return right after these brief messages.
In order for the light to shine so brightly, the darkness must be present. Tune in every Monday at 10 o'clock. The Dark Sun Rising on the Para-X Radio Network.
Hi, this is Marla Brooks from Stirring the Cauldron. Thursdays are a great night on the Para-X Radio Network. We start off the evening with Journey into the Light, Chapter 3, with your hosts, Psychic Little T and Tabby Cat Gash at 7 p.m. Eastern. Then, on the first and third Thursdays of the month at 8 p.m., it's Tango and Friends, hosted by Bruce Tango. And on the alternate Thursdays at 8 p.m., tune in to Stirring the Cauldron, the archive podcast. Every week at 9 p.m. Eastern, join me on Stirring the Cauldron Live. And then at 10 p.m., stick around for New Aeon Now with Lily Alley, Davron Michaels, and Christine Matza. Finally, to round out the night, join Dr. Kelly Renee Schutz on the Paranormal Encounters podcast. All this every Thursday, right here on Para-X.
Have you ever wondered what Jesus and his followers would say if you could receive their messages today? In his new book, Spirits Speak, Channeling Jesus and the Holy Spirits, channeler and author Barry Strohm answers those questions for you. Using his gift of spirit communication, he brings you messages from such Holy Spirits as Moses, John the Baptist, Mary Magdalene, Mother Mary, Jesus, and even Mother Teresa and the Reverend Billy Graham. They discuss topics that are important for contemporary life in these troubled times. Spirits Speak, Channeling Jesus and the Holy Spirits is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other booksellers. Signed copies are available on the author's website, spiritspredict.com. After reading this book, you will never again say, "What would Jesus say or do?" Welcome back to Channeling History. Now, here are your hosts, Barry and Connie Strohm.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. Connie, we've got a lot of ground to cover. So
We certainly do, and I'm going to start with a few questions out of our chat room. As the CI chief and as president, what did you learn about UFOs?
I had known for a long time that aliens had existed. Anybody that has a high-ranking office in government understands that. I had seen documents, they had shown me proof of it, and I had known that there were a lot of top secret operations that were taking place.
Okay, and another question from our chat. What do you think of how China is fighting the COVID?
As I watch from over here, I think that China is actually paying the karma for what they created. Their government, their population is so dense that they have problems isolating COVID vaccine or people that have COVID. They are very brutal in how they treat it. They isolate people. I'm not sure that is the proper way to do it. I don't truly understand why they don't rely more on 100% vaccinations in order to stop it. But I think that karma is real for them.
Okay, let's get back to Jack Kennedy's assassination. Were members of the CIA responsible for that?
there were individuals that had been associated with the CIA that participated.
Yeah. And one more little thing about the aliens. Obviously, the government has been working with them to a point. How long have they been working with aliens?
Well over 100 years.
Okay. Do you think that the CIA has been politicized today?
One thing that I tried to do was keep the CIA non-political. I thought it was very important for our national defense that it was not used for political purposes and that Congress would look at it as a neutral agency. Today, the FBI, CIA, everything has become politicized. Politicians have realized that it is possible for them to use our agencies as their own political weapons.
It's terrible. In 1980, you ran against Ronald Reagan for the Republican nomination for president. You referred to his policies as voodoo economics. Why did he still select you as his vice president?
I realized pretty early that I was not going to be able to beat him in the primaries. So I dropped out early so that I didn't draw any more resistance towards him. I tried to support him. I worked very hard for him. I think he realized that I represented a part of the country that he needed, that I could bring funding to his campaign. I think he just simply realized that I was probably the best choice for him at the time.
Okay. You assumed the role of vice president in 1981 during the Reagan administration and served for 8 years with him. What was it like being vice president under President Reagan?
Reagan was an incredibly personal individual. There was a lot to be learned from him, and he was really a lot more knowledgeable than I ever gave him credit for. He knew what he wanted. He knew he wanted to try to bring peace with Russia. He knew he wanted to break down he wanted to end the Cold War. He wanted to slow up on nuclear proliferation. He had very clear goals, and it was actually, I considered it a great honor, and I learned a lot serving under him.
Yeah. What was your opinion of Mikhail Gorbachev?
In the beginning, I did not trust him. Traditionally, you have to be very slow to trust any Russians. Throughout time, their words have meant very little. Best example of that is Putin. If you want to see someone lie, watch his lips move. Gorbachev, I did not trust in the beginning. President Reagan thought that he could be trusted, and he represented an opportunity, and he pursued it, and he was correct. Gorbachev truly wanted to bring about world peace.
Do you spend time with him now that you're on the other side?
I do see him over here. He spends a lot of time with Ronald, but they were good friends. I was kind of on the periphery of a lot of it, so I didn't know him nearly as well as Ronald did. But yes, I do see him over here.
Okay. In 1986, your political career was damaged by the Iran-Contra affair. Will you tell us what happened and what knowledge did you have of the incident?
Congress was very touchy about not having the ability to allocate funding. We wanted to help Noriega in Nicaragua, and Congress did not want a part of it. The CIA developed a plan where we would sell weapons to Iran, and at that time, keep in mind, Iran was our ally, and then we would use the money to support Noriega. The press got a hold of it, and it did not work out real well for me. I must admit that it was a bad decision on my part to allow something like that to take place.
Yeah. In 1989, you were elected president. A key part of your campaign was a pledge to not raise taxes. Why did you make that pledge?
At the time, I wanted to be elected. I know I made too big a deal out of it. The words that today I still shudder about is "watch my lips, no new taxes." Well, we needed taxes. I was trying not to let the national debt get out of control, and there was literally no way we could maintain some type of fiscal responsibility without raising taxes. This was one time the American public had a very good memory, and they rewarded me.
So, what do you think about our national debt today?
I think it's a disgrace. I think it's a terrible disgrace, and I think it's a bomb that will go off sometime for our future generations. As we watch from over here, we cannot believe the scale of spending that the government is carrying out today. The national debt has grown to such a point that I don't think there's any way that you can ever really truly think of paying it off. I don't know how our children and grandchildren, or your children and grandchildren, are going to ever overcome this yoke that government has put around their neck.
Yeah. In 1990, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. Do you have any doubts about the way you handled Operation Desert Storm?
Yes. I have many doubts about it. I truly felt that Hussein had to be stopped because I felt if we didn't stop him going into Kuwait, that he would maybe go into Saudi or affect the oil supply. There's so many things that he could do. I went in, I built a strong coalition to do it. I am sorry that I didn't finish things. Many of our political partners felt that the country would be in much worse condition if we totally destroyed their entire government. Yeah. We should have finished what we started.
So that's why you didn't invade Baghdad?
I followed my advisor's advice. I thought that we should, but they felt, and many of the other countries that were part of the coalition felt that we should not totally destroy the governmental structure, that everybody thought that we would be able to control him after this, after the battle, or after Desert Storm.
Okay. What do you consider your greatest accomplishment as president?
I think my greatest accomplishment was following through on what Reagan started in stopping the Soviet Union. We needed to do a lot of things. Obviously, the Soviet Union had many, many problems afterwards, after the falling of the Berlin Wall. Gorbachev exceeded what he was able to accomplish, and his political enemies eventually overtook him. I think the fact that we got through my presidency without any great wars, that we actually did accomplish reducing nuclear weapons. I think that I did accomplish quite a bit, but sadly, there's a lot more that I could have done.
What do you consider your greatest mistake as president?
Getting involved with Iran-Contra. I should have acknowledged that something like that could not be kept undercover.
Looks like our chat room's getting busy again. One of our listeners would like to know, are you proud of Jenna for being a news person?
Absolutely. I love all my children. I think they've all been very successful. I think George did a good job. I know that as I aged, I hated to see people speaking badly of him, and many people did. But Jenna is truly a light.
That's great. In 1992, you lost to Bill Clinton. Why do you think you lost that election?
I think that it was just one big reason was the Republicans had been in too long. Our policies had become stagnant. We had a few things that the people did not approve of, such as Iran-Contra. I think that the time was just simply ripe for a change. And Bill was extremely personable. He had not made a lot of enemies in his political life. He was an attractive candidate.
Okay, what do you think about Hillary?
Hillary has a few of her own problems. She's very bitter towards the world. She has a thirst for power. She has a feeling of invincibility. Hillary is a very, very bitter woman at this time.
Yeah. Is there a one world order of rich and influential individuals that make our governmental decisions?
There are some incredibly rich people that have incredible influence over many of our politicians at this time. These people talk, they get together, and they truly decide what is best for themselves. There are people of incredible wealth that desire great powers. Many of them think that a democratic form of government is not the proper way, is not the way future. Many of them think that they can assume powerful leadership of the world. There are people that are currently having great influences upon our elections. George Soros is one of them. He is trying to undermine our democratic processes, and people have got to respond to what is taking place. They have to understand that there are individuals out there that are putting candidates up that will undermine our democratic way of life. There are people with great money that think socialism is wonderful because it is a great equalizer for everybody but those that have great money. So yes, there is an order of rich and influential people out there.
Were you a member of the One World Order?
There were times that I did participate with that group. There were times that they would support what I was doing, and there were times that they would not support what I was doing. But I was in contact with them.
Is there any way our country can survive if these people gain total control?
No. If these people gain total control, you will lose your individual rights. In case you haven't noticed, there's been an erosion of individual rights in the United States. Freedom of the press. The press is taking advantage of the rights that they have, and many members of the press are not bringing you the truth about what is truly taking place out there. They're trying to undermine your rights to protect yourself through the Second Amendment. Ever since the World Trade Center attack, individual rights have been under attack on the pretext of protecting our government from terrorists. If you read the news, you will see that there's many instances where individual rights of people are being violated. I would suggest that everybody take some time to do some reading and learn just what is taking place.
Yeah. Is our current president being manipulated by these people?
These people have grown immensely strong, especially in the way that they donate to the presidential candidates. Your current president pays very, very close attention to what these people want. He totally understands that a lot of his success is a result of the finances that these people have put into his campaign and the campaign of those people that have supported him.
What is your opinion of Russia and Vladimir Putin?
It appears as though Russia has not changed since 1900. Putin wants to be another Stalin. He does not care about the loss of life. He does not care about, really, he doesn't care about how Russia is thought of in the world. Russia has a very small GNP, and Putin has totally overestimated his strength, and he underestimated how the rest of the world would react to his attempt to take more lands and to conquer Ukraine. If that had been successful, you can rest assured that he would go on after more countries as well. He does fear NATO. He knows that NATO has the ability to totally defeat his army and his military. And he understands that NATO could essentially wipe Russia off the face of the earth. Putin is evil. There's no other two ways to describe it.
Do you think he will use nuclear weapons?
I fear that he is crazy enough to do it, but I think that those around him will stop him. Those around him understand that if they're first to use nuclear weapons, NATO has got so many of them that all of those that may help make the decision will be turned into dust. I think that those around him love their families. I do not think they want to see their families exterminated. And I do not think that they want to see Moscow cease to exist. So on the one hand, I do think that Putin would make the decision to use them. But I feel that those in the military and those around him would have enough common sense to stop him.
What do you see as the future for Russia?
I see a time of great poverty ahead for Russia. There is no way that all of the economic sanctions that the rest of the world has put upon them is not going to take a great toll upon their country. Their young men have fled in order to avoid being taken into the military. Their more intelligent individuals saw what was coming and they left the country as well. Russia is going to be short of human resources. The world now knows that their military is not as powerful as they thought it was. Russia is going to be a pariah. Russia is feared mainly because of their history of stupid actions. People know that you cannot trust them. So Russia is going to have a very, very, very difficult time.
Okay, one last question out of our chat room. What are some of the false beliefs that we have about 9/11?
Well, the people behind 9/11 basically came from Saudi Arabia. That's been kept from the people. 9/11 had people supporting it whose names have not become public. Many of the people that are trying to control your world today had some influence in 9/11. Someday the truth will probably come out, but there are many things that people do not understand.
Okay, it looks like we are running out of time. I'm not going to be able to get to all of our questions, but I would like to know, do you have a final message for us, sir? And thank you so much for joining us.
Yes. Have you ever seen a politician that did not have a final message? I want to thank you for allowing me to speak. I tried to tell you the truth. I tried to point things out to you that will help you make decisions into your future lives. I hope that everyone out there takes time to understand what is happening politically around them. You're living in a time where social media, where your newspapers, where it is very, very easy to manipulate what news is being allowed. People have to stand up. There's been a steady erosion of rights, of your personal rights, that has been taking place in the United States. Democratic socialism has been growing in many of the democracies of the world. You all need to understand that only a knowledgeable group of people living in a country can make political decisions that will guide and strengthen countries into the future. All the civilizations of the world have failed because people in charge are more interested in wealth, in power, that they show greed, that they could care less what happens to the people of the world. Look at the Soviet Union. Those poor people have been lied to for so long, they do not know the truth. Do not think for one moment that that cannot happen in the United States, because it can. The United States is actually at a decision time. Many countries have nuclear weapons. North Korea is a great problem. Your leaders have got to be strong, and they've got to make decisions that will deter these idiots from endangering human life on Earth. It is only through a strong base of individuals that understand what is taking place and respect their own rights that the United States can continue to function. You've got to control this insane spending. You've got to understand the safety of the country depends on a strong police force, a strong military, and a strong government that is capable of cooperating with each other, is capable of making laws that help the people and not themselves. Common sense. Everyone just simply needs the common sense, and our country will do great. So thank you for allowing me to come through tonight. I appreciate the opportunity, and I would actually enjoy coming back again if I was invited.
One of our listeners did invite you. She would like you to come back, sir. So we might just have to do that.
Okay. Next week, we're going to have a total change of pace. We're going to be channeling Abraham, the founder of the Jewish religion, long, long ago. He is an individual that holds respect in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So should be some very interesting questions there. Submit your questions and suggestions for future guests on our email, channelinghistory, on parax@gmail.com. My new book, Messages of God for a Modern World, is currently available on Amazon in softcover and Kindle. It has 60 messages of Jesus that we received in our Wednesday morning podcast. It's a great devotional book. Signed copies are only available on my website. So thank you for listening. Please join us on Sundays at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on the ParaX Radio Network.
And I would also like to thank you all for joining us this evening and for submitting some good questions for Mr. President. God bless all of you. Have yourselves a wonderful week, and we'll be back next week.
Thanks for listening to Channeling History. Tune in again next week for another electrifying episode, as we never know who will make an appearance or who will come through the portal. Any rebroadcast or other use of this program without explicit permission is strictly prohibited. Copyright 2020. Our Story Begins by Kevin MacLeod, licensed through Incompetech.com.